This week, we speak with Dr. Brooke Struck, who is an expert in behavioral finance, but especially in helping people to draw out what's important to them so that when financial advisors give financial advice to retail clients, it helps them to resonate with what's important to them so that the people who are getting the planning work being done for them feel ownership and actually take the actions and feel comfortable along the way. You won't want to miss this. Make Better Wealth Decisions, a podcast that explores how financial advisors' blind spots can harm your investments. I'm your host, John DeGuy, a portfolio manager with Design Securities in Toronto. In this podcast, we'll provide advice on how you can achieve better outcomes by maximizing investments and minimizing taxes. Let's put our thinking caps on as we consciously decide to get smarter about our money. This week's guest is Brooke Struck. He is the founder and CEO of Converge, which is where he helps clients build standout strategies and thriving teams of leaders. Dr. Struck held a research directorship at the Decision Lab before coming to his new position, where he was the lead for the behavioral finance portfolio. Brooke, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Love to maybe have you begin by just telling us in 1 minute what you do.
Yeah, I try to help teams to get clear to themselves about what their goals are, to commit to those goals and to commit to each other. So that's a little bit different than the way that a lot of other consultants work, where I'm really trying to bring it out of the client. In a certain sense, I don't want to make them accountable to me. I want to make sure that they're really accountable to each other and that I'm accountable to them.
It's funny because I'm just watching the final season of Billions, and there's a character on that show that is an in-house HR person who's actually a coach to draw out those sorts of things. That's, by the way, where the word education comes from. Educo, the Latin word, means to draw out. And
Yeah,
so it seems like that's what you're doing. You're educating insofar as you're drawing out certain elements of what people do.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
One of the things that I've always loved in business is that in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice, there is.
Yeah,
And there is a connection between discovery and implementation that you work with.
yeah.
And I think it's really important to get things right from the get go. So, could you take a moment to explain why it's important to get the facts right before you dive in?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll come back to the way that you just ended that, getting the facts right before you dive in. Discovery is definitely about facts, but it's about a lot more than facts as well. And that's something that my research and my practice have both really illustrated. So it's a topic that I started working on when I was more focused on the behavioral wellness, behavioral finance, financial wellness and behavioral finance stuff. Really looking at the implementation gap, right? The famous implementation gap. How many
Mhm.
great financial strategies go on to die a slow and silent death sitting somewhere on a shelf, right? They never actually see the light of day. The great recommendations that so much time and energy and creativity have gone into formula never actually get put into practice. So that was the target that I was really starting to take a serious run at. And I got interested in how it is that planners tie back the financial plans to the goals of the client and to the motivators of the client. Right? What is it that keeps clients motivated through a process that can be quite lengthy of going through all the discovery and data handoff and all this kind of stuff, formulating the plan, revising it, then getting into implementation. Like this can extend over the course of months. How do we keep um, that sense of freshness with clients about why it is that they showed up in the first place and tap back into that source to keep them excited and motivated about the work that we're doing together? And one of the things, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so that's fine. I just thought that there could be a discussion about keeping it fresh. Different people define it in different ways. So some people will say, "I just want to be able to sleep at night, and give me a plan that'll help me sleep at night." And then
Yeah.
others want to actually have the comfort that comes with knowing they're going to be okay. And one of the things I know that you've spoken about is it's important that when you write things out, that you use people's own words to get them to buy in, to get cognitive sonance, to actually understand what's going on. Maybe you can just maybe riff on what I was just saying there and maybe complete your last thought as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's the direction I was going. And, in the discovery phase, it can be easy to ask a client, why are you interested in getting a financial plan? and they'll give you an answer, and that answer on the surface can seem satisfactory. You can say, okay, I've got the information that I need. I can move on. I have lots of questions to ask, lots of ground to cover. And what I've been advocating and the work that I've been doing is really bearing this out is like slowing down and trying to peel back a few more layers when you get that answer of like why the plan is important for the client. So you mentioned this great example, right? The difference between like feeling secure about my finances and being able to sleep at night. Those two are very separate goals, right? Like I can give you a sleeping pill for one of those goals, but not for the other. And so really peeling back some of those layers to understand what is it that will ultimately keep the client motivated over time? Getting into some of those deeper motivators that are not these high peaks and valleys. Like we're talking about these long arcs of like something that will remain important to the client for the foreseeable future. So
Their
slowing
North
down a
Star.
little. Yeah. That's right. So slowing down to really discover in depth what that North Star is.
It reminds me of a guy by the name of Bill Backrack out of San Diego, California. I don't know if you know who Bill is, but
Yeah.
he's been a consultant to the financial services industry. He used to be. I don't think he's been doing much for the past 10 or 15 years, but he's written a few books about this. And one of them was something that was called values based selling or values-based advice. And he would
Yeah.
always encourage advisors to begin with the open-ended question, what's important about money to you? And whatever
Yeah.
answer that person gave, you would then take that. This is now to peel back the layers. Take that answer. Oh, it means security. Okay. What's important about security to you? And the words to you are critical because it has to be personal. Well,
Yeah.
security allows me to do what I want. Okay. What's important about doing what you want to you? And you keep on going down, peeling back the layers so you can get to people's most motivational values so that you can actually remember that we're doing all this in order to actualize these values. And
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful thing because a lot of people think financial advice and financial planning are numbers based.
Yeah.
And one of the purposes of make better wealth decisions, one of my missions here is to get people to understand that a lot of it, most of it even, is usually soft issues.
Yeah. So this is really helpful. Let's get granular on this. So the way that
Okay.
the way that you frame that follow-up question, like what's important about financial security to you? Um, there are actually a range of questions that are all like in the neighborhood of each other that we could ask there. What's important about that to you? You could ask something like, what does that look like to you? How did this come to be important to you? Where are you seeing that? There's a whole range of those questions that are all like chock a block, right? They're
Mhm,
just next door neighbors to each other. And so there's a discovery technique that actually comes from Chris Voss, who is
mhm,
an FBI hostage negotiator. Actually, he's now retired from the FBI. He's
mhm.
doing other things now, still in the negotiation space. But one of the things that he articulated so clearly and so well is like discovery is a key part of successful negotiation, whether that's for hostages or anything else. And so that discovery piece from his work is really powerful in this context as well. And the way that he asks those follow up questions is even more distilled and simple than the example that you just gave. So if you want to say something like financial security is important to me, the mirror that
Okay.
he would provide to get you to follow up would be something like financial security. And just that, leaving that to hang in the air, because
Uh-huh.
what that allows you to do as the planner who's following up in that way, it basically allows you to push the ball back into the court of your client while providing minimal kind of direction to them to which of those close by questions you want them to answer. In essence, you're leaving them the agency to tell you the most important thing that they need to tell you about that.
And moving away from buzzwords and into more granular details, which are oftentimes more motivation.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right.
One of the things that I know you speak about, and it's funny because we talk about different heuristics and biases here on this podcast, and we have the recency bias and we have confirmation bias and whatnot. But one of the things that you talk about is the IKEA effect. And I think it's
Yeah.
really useful when you're working collaboratively between an advisor and a client. For people who don't know what that is, IKEA is a Swedish furniture maker. I have a joke that the CEO of IKEA was elected the president over in Sweden, and he's just going to take the weekend to assemble his cabinet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, jokes aside, the IKEA effect is one where people feel empowered when they play a role in constructing whatever it is that they're going to be bound to. So they're more likely to follow through if they felt they had a hand in the construction of, in this case, the plan. I think that's the sort of thing that it's really insightful and it's self evident. And you're not the first guest that said it. But I find that a lot of people don't think about this. They just give numbers and they go away and they get a beautiful set of spreadsheets, graphs, and charts, but it's not necessarily motivating.
Yeah. And this is something that I've seen a lot in my financial wellness work, and I'm seeing a lot now in my more kind of corporate leadership team work. It's this idea that people want to feel a sense of ownership over the plan. The
Mhm,
more we contribute to something, the more we will feel that it is ours. That's what
mhm.
the IKEA effect is all about, right? You feel this sense of ownership over your cabinet because, like, I built that. I didn't just
Right,
plunk some money down and bring it home from the store. Like, I built that cabinet. So you feel
right.
a kind of greater sense of fidelity to it. The same thing to a financial plan, and the same
Mhm,
thing ultimately to a corporate strategy. This is something that people are very familiar with, I think, in an intuitive way in their professional context. Like, how many times have you had this dictum from on high that just like lands on your desk? You have no idea where it came from. You don't feel that it integrates your perspective, and it feels like something that belongs to someone else. It doesn't belong to you. It's not really for you. You are the one who needs to do something about it, but ultimately it's for someone else. And in the context of financial planning, that's what we're trying to avoid with this deeper discovery process is peeling back those layers of the onion to be able to identify what those core motivators are, those really sticky, enduring values and that sense of identity from the client so that they feel that something really important of them has gone into building this plan so that it feels like their plan, not a plan that my planner built for me. This is my.
and to that end, I think you can say that the role you play is more one of facilitation rather than consultation.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It's about really, and back to your earlier point about education, it's about pulling this out of people. It's not
Right.
about pushing anything in towards them. It's really about helping to highlight this is what you're after. Let's get you out of the weeds and figure out like what are the things that you really want? What's actually important to you? And then helping to formulate strategies that are actually effective in helping you to get there. And in the context of financial planning, there's a lot more kind of external technical work that's done by the planner, right? So like you receive a whole bunch of information about the client as well as their values, and then you go and lock yourself away and you crunch the numbers and formulate the plan. And you come back and pressure test it and then iterate in these kinds of things.
You get a pre-commitment and you get various other things that you can do to make sure that the follow through persists so that it's not just going to be collecting dust on a shelf.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So, one of the things that you have talked about, and I know you were mentioning Chris Voss's technique in the past in terms of getting great ideas out of people and whatnot. You've got an approach that you're talking about that labeling and looping for understanding and mirroring.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder if we could maybe, I'll invite you to do an exercise with me to show how mirroring works because I
Yeah.
know a little bit about it, but you're the expert. So, I'll defer to you. Let's do a mirroring exercise.
Okay, great. So in this role play, I will be the planner and you be the client. So the first thing I want to ask you is what brought you here today?
I was referred to you by my friend Jesse.
Yeah. What is it about that referral that made you think it was a good idea to take your precious time to talk to me?
Jesse says that you're a good guy, and I've got a bit of a sense of where I'm at, but I think I might want to learn a bit more.
Learn a bit more?
People say that you should be planning for retirement, and I've done some planning, and I think I'm going to be okay. But it'd be nice to have a third party expert give me some comfort.
Planning for retirement. Yeah. And so it sounds to me like you're not really sure where you're at when it comes to planning retirement. Am I right in understanding that retirement is the kind of the major driver of what it is that you want to talk about today?
Like I said, I'm not really sure. I think I'm okay. If I were to guess, I would say I'm 80% sure I'm okay. But I don't know. Maybe I'm oversaving. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not worried, but I'm not certain.
Mhm. Okay. I want to stick with this topic of retirement. There are two things that you're talking about here. One is retirement and the other is being okay. Now, one way that I could interpret that is that you're equating those two things. As long as retirement's on track, then you are okay. Does that sound right, or is there something I'm
No,
misunderstanding?
that's about right.
Okay. So retirement is really what being okay is about.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, I want to be happy. I want to be healthy, but I don't think you can help me with my health. I've got a medical doctor for that, and I've got a dentist, and I've got an accountant for my taxes. I just wanted to make sure that I'm going to be okay. So I'm coming to you to work through those things that I think you can help me with.
Okay. So you mentioned a team of professionals that's helping you with it. So it sounds to me like being okay has definitely a financial component to it, but there are other aspects as well.
Oh, for sure. Obviously, I've got my marriage, and I want that to be stable and secure and happy, which it is. But you never know. Life happens.
Yeah. Do you think we should be discussing how it is that those other factors, your health, your physical health, your relationships, these kinds of things, should we be talking about how it is that your finances might impact those?
I hadn't thought about it, but I'm not opposed to it. It's up to you. You tell me.
Okay. You tell me. You want me to be in the driver's seat in this conversation?
Well, you're the expert, so I'm coming to you, and I'm not exactly sure. I think you can help me, but I'm not exactly sure what you can and cannot do, and I don't want to overstep, and I don't want to ask you to do things that you can't do. But if there are things that you can do that you maybe do for other people that they say is useful, at the very least, maybe you can tell me about them, and I'll decide whether or not I want to go down that road as well.
Yeah. So it sounds like there are two things we're talking about in this conversation. One of them is
Yeah.
about how it is that I can help you and what it is that I normally do for other people. And the other is about what it is that you actually want and what would be valuable to deliver to you. Are we on the same wavelength there? So my recommendation would be that we have those two conversations separately to make sure that we're not running them together. There are
Okay.
lots of different things that I can do, but there's a different set of things that's worth doing. As you mentioned, some of you've got other people who are helping you with that, and that's great. And some of them you don't have someone else helping you, and that's what I can help you out with. But ultimately, what I'm hoping our conversation can be about is the meeting place of the marriage between those two things. What it is that creates value for you and what it is that I can deliver.
Perfect. Okay, we'll stop there. I think that's a good place to show a good way to show what mirroring involves, and oftentimes using the person's response to reflect that back to them like a mirror, and but reflecting it back open endedly with very little other direction, so that
Yeah,
that person can then fill in the gaps and describe what the meaning is behind what it is that they profess to want. And a lot of people, I think you would probably agree, have only a very nebulous feeling of what they want. They wanna be
yeah,
told, they wanna be assured and counseled that they're going to be okay. But when you ask them to define what being okay means, they go, "I don't know.
I don't know.
I just wanna be okay."
Yeah,
Like any kind of a race, like, you wanna know when you cross the finish line.
yeah,
And if you're in a race and you just say, "I wanna be able to run a 5-minute kilometer, and I wanna run as many 5-minute kilometers as I can before I drop or before I have to stop." Well, okay, but if that's 2 kilometers, that's one kind of race. If it's 10K, then it's another kind of
yeah,
race, and if it's a marathon, it's another. So, help me out here. What kind of a race are we running? And
yeah,
that's the sort of thing that people don't often, they just say, "It's the race," and that's
yeah.
all.
And actually, one thing that really came out in our conversation that I think is worth illustrating because it's the kind of thing that planners end up with all the time is it wasn't even entirely clear and agreed upfront what conversation we were having.
Right.
Right. So part of it is discovery, but part of it is also just like this a bit of a dance of getting to know each other. Let's think about this in the context of a financial planning engagement. It's like we haven't gotten to know each other at all. We haven't explored whether it's worth working together. We don't have a service agreement signed. Like those are all things that need to be covered off before you get into discovery in this
Right.
kind of highly idealized way. But practice is much messier than that. You start having an early conversation, and it's very easy for some of the stuff in that early conversation to already be leaping ahead to things that you want to learn in discovery. And you start discussing stuff in discovery and realize, hold on, something we talked about when we were setting the terms of the agreement actually wasn't clear at that time. The world is just this big mess that we need to be constantly keeping together into some kind of shape. And so that's where this level of self awareness is really important as well, where even as the planner, you need to know yourself and you need to be aware of your own reactions. That if someone starts pushing the conversation in a different direction around what can you do, it clicks for you. That's actually a separate conversation from what it is that you want. not that it's bad to have that conversation, but that at least it needs to be called out so that the client, as you're speaking with them, feels really like grounded and secure. You both know and agree what conversation you're having at what time, and they feel that sense of predictability, that sense of control. I know where this conversation is, I know where this conversation is going. And that taps into kind of later stage stuff around this technique. You do a lot of mirroring where you're just feeding back a few words and having these open-ended questions. And then the labeling and the looping for understanding, where essentially you're paraphrasing what you've heard and you're checking that indeed
That's correct.
that is being understood the way that the client intended. But then later on after that, what you're going to do with that information is a bunch of signposting.
Right.
So now you arrive and you say, I've got a draft plan that I want to walk you through. I've got a few early suggestions. I'm still mulling stuff over in my mind, but before I do any further work, I just want to take a kind of benchmark check with you. Are we moving in the right direction? In
Right.
order to do that, the beginning of that conversation is, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Client, remember, you came to me because you said that you wanted to feel secure in your retirement. That's what all of these conversations are about. That's why you and I are spending any time together whatsoever. That's what makes this worth your time and your money if you're a fee only plan.
Simon Sinek would say that's just another example of start with why. We're
Yeah.
just doing this. Why are we here? And we can do that. Okay, we're running short on time, so I want to wrap up the way I always do, which is when you ask the question I ask all my guests at the end is we're helping people to make better wealth decisions. So I'm going to ask you for your advice with regard to making better wealth decisions. And as a bonus, because you've got real expertise in this field, if at all possible, and maybe it's not, could you maybe talk about the blind spots that some financial advisors may have that they might not even be aware of themselves when they make
Mm,
financial decisions or when they give financial advice?
right. So making better financial decisions. I think the first thing is to avoid these kinds of Pyrrhic victories of winning the battle, but losing the war. A client approaches you, they say they want one thing, you accept that at face value, you go through this lengthy process to build an amazing plan for them to get to that endpoint, to cross that finish line. The client accepts the plan. The client pours a whole bunch of time and money into implementing those recommendations. And at the end of the day, they don't feel fulfilled by the progress that they've made. All of that because we took at face value what it is that somebody was asking. So that for me is the biggest thing around making better financial decisions is just be much, much clearer on what it is that we're looking to accomplish. There's this great saying, I think it's Abraham Lincoln, who said, if someone gave me 4 hours to cut down a tree, I'd spend the first three sharpening the axe. Problem formulation is really important. Make sure that you know what the target is. And so much of what follows afterwards will actually be smooth and simple, the way that it's supposed to be according to the text. So that's
Perfect.
one. The
That's all I
other,
need. Oh,
yeah,
okay. If you've got another, I think we've got time for one more. Sure, let's go one more.
yeah. So the other thing is to your second question, right around the blind spot, and that is this: the blind spot I want to highlight is the discrepancy between our rational selves and our emotional selves. And behavioral economics has been really guilty, I think, of giving short shrift to our emotional selves. It's like highlight all of these biases and heuristics and all these ways that we are not rational. But what's lurking in the background there, and rational is really what we ought to be. And so emotions are these kinds of things that we wish we could just seal up in a box and ship off to Abu Dhabi, never to think of again. But in fact, it's not that simple. Like we need to engage with the emotional side of our clients, if for no other reason than the goals that they set are emotional. It can be rational to try to optimize the way that we approach one goal. Like one approach can be more optimized than another to get to a goal. But there's no sense in which holding one goal is more rational than holding another goal. It's like asking what your favorite color is or what your favorite food is. It's not a question of rationality and judging whether it's the right one. So, same kind of thing. Like if we try to minimize people's emotions, we're actually going to distance ourselves from the things that actually create value for them, which is ultimately what we need to be tying back to. And that expresses itself throughout the course of the engagement. Like when we think about these disconnects between our rational and emotional selves, There are times when my rational brain knows that I shouldn't be frustrated about something. I know that my daughter eating dinner too slowly is not such a big deal. Bedtime is not going to be this horrible travesty just because we're a little bit later in the day than the plan. But in spite of the fact that intellectually I know that, I still feel like, ugh, quit dawdling here.
I've been
And
there, brother. Yeah.
yeah,
I know.
so recognizing that clients are experiencing that there are things that your client can intellectually understand as the right course of action, and yet they still don't feel comfortable with it. And ultimately, that level of comfort is actually very important. If you tell someone, all things considered, this is the best course of action for you, except you are going to have trouble sleeping at night because
Yeah.
of how much more risky this is compared to your level of tolerance. That's not actually the right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Even if they do implement the thing, they won't feel comfortable, and that will have been a failure.
As they say, the best plan is a plan that you can stick to and live with. And if you can't stick to it and live with it, it's not that great after all. That's it for
Yeah.
me. Brooke, you've been really wonderful. Thank you so much for all your insights. I really enjoyed our conversation. I want to wish you all the
Thank
best.
thank you very much. And same to you.
John DeGuy is a portfolio manager with Design Securities in Toronto. The views expressed in this program are not to be construed as specific advice. It is recommended that you consult a qualified advisor before taking action. His books, The Professional Financial Advisor 4, Stand Up to the Financial Services Industry, and Bullshift are available through Amazon and in bookstores throughout Canada. You can reach John at 647 Stand Up. That's 647 782 6387 or at jdeguy@designedsecurities.ca.